8 months pregnant and exhausted, Bella Davis wiped sweat from her forehead as she chased after 3-year-old Emma in the park. The little girl had chocolate smeared across her face and was running toward the fountain with sticky fingers. "Emma, come back here," Bella called out, her voice strained from the weight she was carrying. Her back ached terribly, but the family she worked for as a nanny paid her just enough to survive in the tiny studio apartment Morris left her with. As she bent down to catch the giggling child, a shadow fell across them both. Bella looked up, shielding her eyes from the afternoon sun, and froze. A tall man in an expensive black suit stood before her, his dark eyes wide with shock and something that looked like relief. Behind him stood 3 other men in similar suits, all watching her intently like predators assessing their prey. "Bella," the man whispered, his voice barely audible. His hands trembled slightly as he reached toward her face, then stopped himself. "I found you." Bella instinctively stepped back, pulling Emma closer to her. Her heart pounded with a strange mix of fear and confusion. The men around him carried themselves with the kind of stillness that spoke of violence, and their leader commanded attention without saying a word. "I'm sorry. Do I know you? You're scaring the child." The man's face crumpled slightly, as if her words physically wounded him. "You don't remember me," he said, more to himself than to her. When he looked up again, his expression shifted into something harder, more controlled. "Of course, you don't remember me." He straightened, and suddenly the vulnerability was gone, replaced by an authority that made the air around them feel dangerous. "My name is Jae-sung. Kang Jae-sung. I need to get Emma home," Bella said firmly, though something about his voice made her stomach flutter in a way she couldn't explain. But as she turned to walk away, Emma broke free from her grasp and ran straight to Jae-sung, wrapping her tiny arms around his leg. Instead of being annoyed, Jae-sung knelt down immediately, his entire demeanor softening as he smiled at the child. "Hello, beautiful. What's your name?" His voice was gentle, but Bella noticed how his men automatically formed a protective circle around them. "Emma," the girl giggled, "you smell like my daddy's cologne." Jae-sung gently lifted Emma and handed her back to Bella, his fingers brushing against hers for just a moment. The contact sent an electric shock up her arm that she tried to ignore. "Bella, you're coming with me," he said quietly, but with an authority that brooked no argument. "I'm not going anywhere with a stranger," she replied, though her voice lacked conviction. "You're 8 months pregnant, working as a nanny, and living God knows where," Jae-sung said, his voice growing more intense. "You need proper care. You need protection." His eyes swept over her worn clothes and tired face with a possessiveness that should have frightened her, but somehow didn't. "You need to come home." Before she could protest, he was signaling to one of his men. "Take the child back to her family," he commanded in a tone that made it clear this wasn't a request. "Make sure they're compensated generously for any inconvenience, and ensure they understand that their silence about this encounter would be appreciated." The way he said the last part made Bella's skin prickle. This wasn't just a wealthy businessman. This was someone people feared. "Wait, I can't just leave Emma." "She'll be returned safely to her family within the hour," Jae-sung assured her, his hand finding the small of her back to support her weight. "They'll also find an anonymous donation in their account that will cover her college education. But you need medical attention immediately." "You can't just throw money at people and expect—" "I can do whatever I want," he said simply, and something in his tone made her believe him completely. "The question is what's best for you and the baby you're carrying." As they walked toward a sleek black car, Bella felt her legs growing weak. Jae-sung noticed immediately, sweeping her up into his arms despite her protests. "Put me down. I can walk." "No, you can't," he said firmly, and she could feel the strength in his arms, the controlled power of someone who was used to taking what he wanted. "You can barely stand. How long have you been pushing yourself like this?" As he settled her into the leather back seat, Bella found herself studying his face. There was something familiar about him, something that made her feel safe despite the obvious danger he represented. "Tell me about the baby," he said as the car pulled away from the park. "What about it?" she asked, one hand instinctively moving to her swollen belly. "When are you due? Do you know the gender?" His question seemed casual, but she could hear an underlying tension in his voice. "Next month. It's a boy." She watched his face carefully as she spoke, looking for any reaction. "I was thinking of naming him James." Something flickered across Jae-sung's features. Surprise, pain, something else she couldn't identify. His hands clenched into fists in his lap before he consciously relaxed them. The car pulled up to massive iron gates that opened automatically, revealing a sprawling mansion that took Bella's breath away. This wasn't just wealth. This was power. "You live here?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We live here," he corrected, helping her out of the car. As they walked through the front door, Bella was overwhelmed by the opulence surrounding her. Everything screamed money and influence, but what struck her most was how the staff moved around Jae-sung, with a deference that went beyond employment into something closer to fear and respect. "Sir," an older woman appeared immediately. "Should I prepare the blue suite?" "The master bedroom," Jae-sung said without hesitation. "And call Dr. Kim immediately. Tell him it's urgent." Bella stood up abruptly, panic rising in her chest. "I can't stay in your bedroom. I can't stay here at all. This is insane. I don't know you." Jae-sung was beside her in an instant, and for the first time, she saw a flash of the danger that lurked beneath his controlled exterior. "You will stay," he said quietly, "because you have nowhere else to go, and because I won't allow you to put yourself or that baby at risk." "You won't allow?" she repeated, anger flaring despite her exhaustion. "That's correct," he said, and there was steel in his voice now. "You can fight me on this, Bella, but you won't win, and fighting me will only tire you out more than you already are." The casual way he acknowledged his own power should have terrified her, but instead it made her feel strangely protected. If you're sitting there wondering why a pregnant African woman has no memory of the Korean Mafia boss who's desperately searching for her, then you're exactly where you need to be. Drop a heart emoji in the comments if you're ready for this emotional journey, and don't forget to subscribe, because trust me, you do not want to miss how this unfolds. Dr. Kim arrived within 30 minutes, and after his examination, he spoke privately with Jae-sung in the hallway. Bella could hear the low murmur of their voices, but couldn't make out the words. When Jae-sung returned, his expression was grim. "You're malnourished and exhausted. Dr. Kim says you need complete bed rest until delivery." "I can't afford complete bed rest," Bella said practically. "I have to work." "Not anymore," Jae-sung replied. "Your only job now is taking care of yourself and the baby." "I can't just let you support me. I don't even know why you're helping me." Jae-sung was quiet for a long moment, studying her face, as if memorizing it. "Let's just say I have a vested interest in your well-being." That night, as Bella lay in the most luxurious bed she ever experienced, she couldn't stop thinking about her mysterious benefactor. There was something about the way he looked at her, the way he seemed to know exactly what she needed, that suggested their connection ran deeper than random kindness. But every time she tried to reach for the memories that felt just out of grasp, her mind hit a wall. The accident took more than just her memories. It took her sense of who she was. The only person she could remember clearly from before was Morris. Morris, who promised to take care of her, but instead made her life a careful balance of walking on eggshells and accepting that she was lucky he tolerated her at all. Jae-sung sat in his study long into the night, staring at the DNA results he obtained and wrestling with memories that felt both precious and painful. The irony wasn't lost on him. He spent months searching for the woman he loved, only to find her carrying his child with no memory of how they created that life together. Finding her in that park, 8 months pregnant and working as a nanny with no memory of him at all, hurt him more than any physical wound ever could. His mind drifted back to the beginning, to the day that changed everything for him. Bella Davis walked nervously into the gleaming lobby of Kang Industries, clutching her portfolio and clearly trying to calm her racing heart. She applied for the personal assistant position to one of Seoul's most powerful businessmen, though rumors suggested his wealth came from sources that existed in the gray areas between legitimate business and something much darker. Jae-sung was in a particularly foul mood that day. His previous assistant quit after discovering exactly what kind of business he was really in, and he was tired of cycling through staff who couldn't handle the reality of working for someone whose empire was built on more than just corporate deals. When Bella walked into his office wearing a professional blue dress and an expression of nervous determination, his first thought was that she would last maybe a week before the intimidation factor sent her running. "Miss Davis," he said, not bothering to look up from the contracts he was reviewing, "tell me why you want to work for me." "Because I'm organized, efficient, and I pay attention to details that others miss," she replied, her voice steady despite the nerves he could sense beneath the surface. "And because I need this job more than I've ever needed anything in my life." The honesty in her answer made him look up. Most people who sat in that chair fed him carefully crafted responses designed to impress him. She was simply telling him the truth. "At least you're honest," he said. "Most people tell me what they think I want to hear." "Would you like me to tell you what you want to hear instead?" she asked, then immediately looked like she regretted the bold question. But the slight challenge in her voice, the spark of personality beneath the professional veneer, intrigued him. "What I want to hear," he said slowly, "is that you can handle working for someone with a complicated reputation without asking questions you don't really want answered." "Mr. Kang," she said, meeting his eyes directly for the first time, "I don't care if you're a businessman, a philanthropist, or something much more dangerous. I care that you need someone reliable, and I need a job that will let me take care of the people I love." Something shifted in his chest at her words. "The people you love?" "My fiancé," she said, and he could have sworn he felt something like disappointment settle in his stomach. "Morris, we're planning our wedding, and these things are expensive." Jae-sung felt a bitter smile cross his face as he remembered that moment. Even then, sitting across from the woman who would change his life completely, he should have known that anyone willing to make her responsible for funding their own wedding wasn't worthy of her. "Planning your wedding?" he asked, genuinely curious about this arrangement. "And you're handling the expenses?" "Well, yes," she replied, looking slightly confused by his question. "Morris is focused on his career right now, so the planning falls to me, along with, making sure we can afford everything." "How thoughtful of him," Jae-sung said, his tone dry enough to make her glance at him sharply. "Most grooms I know consider it their responsibility to ensure they can afford the wedding they're proposing. But perhaps Morris operates under different principles." Something flickered across her face. Uncertainty, maybe even embarrassment. "Morris is very career-focused," she said defensively. "He trusts me to handle these things." "I see," Jae-sung said quietly, though what he saw was a man who was taking advantage of her generous nature. "Well, Miss Davis, you're honest, direct, and apparently fearless. You start Monday." What he didn't tell her was that he made his decision the moment she walked through his door. Something about her presence lit up his cold office in a way that no amount of expensive lighting ever could. Over the following weeks, Bella proved to be everything she promised and more. She anticipated his needs before he voiced them, organized his chaotic schedule with military precision, and somehow managed to make his sterile office feel more like home than the mansion he returned to each night. "Your coffee, Mr. Kang," she would say each morning, placing his usual order on his desk. "Dark and complex, just like your reputation." The joke became their little routine, and it never failed to amuse him. "Careful, Miss Davis. People might think you're being familiar with your intimidating boss." "People might think a lot of things," she would reply with that smile that made his day brighter. "Doesn't mean we have to care what they think." But as the months passed, Jae-sung began to notice things that troubled him deeply. Bella would arrive at work with dark circles under her eyes, claiming she didn't sleep well. She would flinch when her phone rang, especially if it was Morris calling. And sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, she would touch her wrist or shoulder as if they were tender. His suspicions were confirmed a few weeks later when Morris arrived at the office unannounced, demanding to see Bella. Jae-sung was in a meeting, but he could hear raised voices from the reception area. "You embarrassed me last night," Morris was saying, his voice cold and angry. talking to that client like you have opinions worth hearing." "I was just making conversation," Bella replied, and Jae-sung could hear the fear beneath her calm tone. "You are making me look like a man who can't control his woman," Morris snapped. "Don't let it happen again." Jae-sung ended his meeting abruptly and stepped into the hallway, just in time to see Morris grab Bella's arm roughly. The sight of another man putting his hands on her in anger made Jae-sung see red. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice deadly quiet. Morris immediately released Bella's arm and forced a smile. "Mr. Kang, no problem at all. Just discussing wedding plans with my beautiful fiancé." "Wedding plans," Jae-sung repeated slowly, his eyes never leaving the spot where Morris had grabbed Bella. "How wonderful that you're taking such an active role in the planning process. Though, I have to say, I'm impressed by your efficiency. Most couples spend months planning together." "Well, Bella handles most of the details," Morris said with a casual shrug that made Jae-sung's blood pressure spike. "I'm busy with work, you understand, but she's very capable." "Indeed she is," Jae-sung replied, his tone deceptively mild. "Miss Davis, would you mind preparing the Morrison contracts for my review?" It wasn't an urgent task, but it gave Bella an excuse to escape to her desk. As she walked away, Jae-sung noticed her rubbing her arm where Morris had gripped it. "Mr. Morris," Jae-sung said, turning his full attention to the other man, "I trust you understand that this is a place of business. My assistant's personal life shouldn't interfere with her work performance." "Of course not," Morris said, but there was something in his eyes that made Jae-sung's jaw clench. "Bella can be emotional sometimes. I'm just helping her stay focused on what's important." After Morris left, Jae-sung found himself watching Bella more carefully. The way she would apologize profusely for the smallest mistakes, as if she expected to be punished for imperfection. The way she would check her phone constantly, as if afraid of missing a call. Most heartbreaking of all, the way the light in her eyes seemed to dim a little more each day. "Bella," he said one evening when they were both working late, "you know you can talk to me if something is troubling you." She looked up from her computer, and for a moment he thought she might confide in him, but then she forced a smile and shook her head. "Everything's fine, Mr. Kang. Just wedding planning stress. You know how these things are." Jae-sung almost laughed at the absurdity of her statement. "Actually, I don't know how these things are. In my experience, wedding planning is usually a shared responsibility between partners." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, perhaps, that someone would expect Morris to participate in planning his own wedding. "Morris is very busy with his career," she said carefully. "He trusts me to handle the details." "How generous of him to trust you with planning and funding your own celebration," Jae-sung replied, his tone dry enough that she looked at him sharply. "It's not like that," she said, but there was uncertainty in her voice. "Isn't it?" he asked gently. "Bella, when was the last time Morris contributed anything to this relationship besides criticism and demands?" The question hung between them, and he could see her struggling with an answer that wouldn't come. The breaking point came 6 months into her employment, on the night that would change everything between them. Kang Industries just secured the biggest deal in the company's history, and Jae-sung insisted on celebrating with the core team that made it possible. At the restaurant, Bella was quieter than usual, picking at her food and checking her phone repeatedly with increasing anxiety. "Everything all right?" he asked her quietly while the others were distracted by toasts and laughter. "Morris wanted me home by 8, she said, glancing at her watch. "It's already past 9. "You're an adult, Bella," he replied carefully. "Surely he understands that work sometimes requires flexibility." The look she gave him was filled with such fear and resignation that it made his chest ache. "You don't understand. Morris doesn't like it when I don't follow the rules he sets." "What rules?" Before she could answer, her phone rang. Morris's name on the screen made her face go pale. "I should take this," she said, stepping away from the table. But the restaurant was small enough that Jae-sung could still hear Morris's angry voice even from across the room. "Where the hell are you?" "I'm at a work dinner," Bella replied quietly. "I told you this morning that we might run late." "I don't care what you told me this morning. I told you to be home by 8. Do you think your little job is more important than your obligations to me? Of course not, Morris. I'm sorry. I'll leave right now. You'll leave when I'm done talking, Morris snapped. And when you get home, we're going to have a serious conversation about priorities. Jae-sung watched Bella's shoulders slump in defeat, and something inside him snapped. Without thinking, he stood and walked over to where she stood. Give me the phone, he said quietly. Mr. Kang, no, I can handle this. But he took the device from her trembling hands. Morris, he said into the phone, his voice carrying just enough edge to make it clear this wasn't a social call. This is Jae-sung Kang, Bella's employer. The silence on the other end was telling, followed by Morris's voice, noticeably more respectful. Mr. Kang, I apologize. I didn't realize. Miss Davis is attending a mandatory company celebration, Jae-sung interrupted, letting just a hint of his true nature seep into his tone. She will be home when our business is concluded, which will be when I decide our business is concluded. I trust you understand. Yes, sir. Of course. Jae-sung ended the call and handed the phone back to Bella, whose eyes were wide with shock and something that looked like gratitude. You didn't have to do that, she said softly. Yes, I did, he replied. No one talks to you like that. Ever. When they returned to the office later to wrap up some paperwork, Bella seemed different somehow. More relaxed, but also more emotional. Thank you, she said as they worked in the quiet of his office, for what you did with Morris. No one has ever stood up for me like that. How long has he been treating you this way? Jae-sung asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. She was quiet for so long that he thought she wouldn't respond. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Since we got engaged, he says he's just trying to help me become the kind of wife he needs. Someone who understands that his career and his needs come first. And what about your needs? He asked, fighting to keep the anger out of his voice. I don't, she started, then stopped. I guess I don't really know what those are anymore. The honesty in her answer broke something inside him. This vibrant, intelligent, incredible woman was slowly being stripped of her sense of self-worth by a man who should have been building her up. Bella, he said gently, you deserve so much better than that. She looked up at him then, really looked at him, and something passed between them that neither could deny anymore. Mr. Kang, she whispered, but she didn't move away when he stood and walked around the desk to where she sat. Jae-sung, he corrected softly. My name is Jae-sung. Jae-sung, she repeated, and hearing his name on her lips made his heart race. You are brilliant, he said, his hand gently touching her cheek. You are strong and kind and beautiful and worthy of love that builds you up instead of tearing you down. Tears began flowing down her face. You don't understand. Morris is right about me. I'm not special. Stop, he said firmly. Don't you ever let anyone make you believe that you're not extraordinary. And then, because he couldn't help himself anymore, because he was in love with her and watching her be diminished was killing him, he kissed her. It was soft and gentle and filled with all the love and respect she was denied for so long. And when she kissed him back, when she melted into his arms like she was waiting for this moment as long as he did, Jae-sung felt his world shift completely. What happened between them that night was tender and passionate, and everything Bella was missing in her relationship with Morris. For the first time in years, she felt cherished, desired, loved for who she truly was. But when she woke up the next morning in his bed, reality crashed down on her like a physical blow. I can't believe this happened, she said, gathering her clothes with shaking hands. I can't believe I let this happen. Bella, please. No, she said firmly, tears streaming down her face. This was wrong. I have a fiancé. I have commitments. You took advantage of me when I was vulnerable. That's not what happened, and you know it, Jae-sung replied, hurt and anger warring in his voice. Morris was right about me, she continued as if he didn't speak. I am weak. I am disloyal. I'm exactly the kind of woman who would betray the man who loves her. Morris doesn't love you, Jae-sung said quietly. Love doesn't tear you down. Love doesn't make you afraid. You don't know anything about my relationship, she snapped, though even as she said it, she knew he was right. I know that what we shared last night was real, he said. I know that, for those few hours, you remembered what it felt like to be valued and cherished. It was a mistake, she insisted, though the words felt like poison on her tongue. It can never happen again. And then she stormed out of his office, out of his building, and an hour later, Jae-sung received the call about her accident. The months of searching for her while Morris claimed she blamed him for what happened, the dead ends and false leads, the growing certainty that he might never see her again. Over the following weeks, Jae-sung established a careful routine around Bella's recovery. He would check on her each morning before leaving for work, ensuring she had everything she needed. His household staff received instructions to treat her with the same deference they showed him, though Bella seemed oblivious to the significance of this gesture. "How are you feeling this morning?" he would ask, settling into the chair beside her bed that became his customary spot. "Better," she would usually reply, though he could see the confusion in her eyes. "Jae-sung, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why are your staff so formal with me? They treat me like I'm someone important instead of just a pregnant woman you're helping." "Because you are important," he would say simply, though he never elaborated on exactly why. Dr. Kim's daily visits confirmed that both Bella and the baby were healthy, but that she needed to remain on strict bed rest. During the long hours while Jae-sung was at work, Bella found herself studying the luxury surrounding her and trying to piece together why a man like him would go to such lengths for a stranger. The expensive maternity clothes that appeared in the closet in exactly her size. The way he seemed to know her preferences for food and drink without asking. Most puzzling of all, the way he sometimes looked at her, not like someone he was helping out of kindness, but like someone he lost and found again. "Tell me about your business," she said one evening as he brought her dinner. "What would you like to know?" he asked carefully. "What kind of work requires 3 bodyguards and bulletproof cars?" "The kind where people sometimes disagree with my methods," he said with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Are you dangerous?" she asked directly. "Very," he replied without hesitation. "But never to you." "How can you be so sure?" "Because hurting you would be like hurting myself," he said quietly. "And I've endured enough pain for one lifetime." The intensity in his voice made her shiver. "You talk like you know me." "I do know you," he said simply. "Better than anyone. But I don't remember you at all." "I know," he said, and the sadness in his voice was unmistakable. "But that doesn't change how I feel." As her due date approached, Bella began experiencing an increasingly strong urge to leave. There was something inside her that kept insisting she didn't belong in this life of luxury and protection, that she should take the baby and find her own way. But every time she seriously considered it, something would stop her. The first time, she actually packed a bag and made it to the front door before overwhelming anxiety forced her back upstairs. The panic was so intense she could barely breathe. "I don't understand what's wrong with me," she told Jae-sung after another failed attempt to leave. "Part of me wants to run, but every time I try, I feel like I'm making a terrible mistake." "Maybe your heart remembers what your mind forgot," he suggested gently. "Or maybe I'm just scared," she said. "Morris spent so much time telling me I was weak and helpless. Maybe I'm afraid I can't actually take care of myself and the baby alone." "Bella," Jae-sung said, moving closer but still maintaining the careful distance they established. "Whatever Morris told you about yourself was designed to keep you dependent on him. You are one of the strongest people I know." "How can you be so sure? We barely know each other." "I'm sure because I spent months watching you handle impossible situations with grace and intelligence," he said. "I know exactly how capable you are." "Months?" she asked sharply. "I thought you said we only met once before my accident." "We did only have one night together," he said carefully. "But I knew you for much longer than that." James was born on a rainy Tuesday morning, arriving 3 weeks early. When Dr. Kim placed the perfect, healthy baby in Bella's arms, she felt a completeness she never knew was possible. "He's beautiful," she whispered through her tears. "He's perfect," Jae-sung agreed, his own eyes wet as he looked at his son for the first time. What should we call him? Bella asked softly. You mentioned James, Jae-sung replied carefully. James, she repeated, testing the name. What's your middle name? Min, he said. James Min Kong, she said, and something about the combination felt exactly right. What struck them both was how naturally the baby seemed to respond to both of them. He calmed at Bella's touch and turned toward Jae-sung's voice as if he was waiting to meet them both. The first few weeks with James were a revelation. Bella discovered that caring for her son came as naturally as breathing, while Jae-sung found himself completely enchanted by the tiny person who seemed to be a perfect blend of both his parents. But as James grew older, Bella's urge to leave intensified. I think I should find my own place, she announced one morning when James was 6 weeks old. You've done so much for us, but we can't stay here forever. The look of pain that crossed Jae-sung's face was immediate and intense. Why? Are you unhappy here? Do you need something I'm not providing? It's not that, she said quickly. It's just, this isn't really our life, is it? This luxury, this security, it's yours. James and I need to figure out how to build our own future. This house, this life, this security, it's all meaningless without you and James in it, Jae-sung said with quiet intensity. But if you want to leave, I won't stop you. He paused, struggling with the words. I just hope you'll let me be part of his life. Let me support you both, even if you don't want to stay here. But what if I told you this could be your life? He asked quietly. What if I told you that you and James belong here? Why would you say that? Instead of answering, Jae-sung pulled out his phone and showed her a document. DNA results, he said simply. Bella stared at the paper, her hands trembling as she read the conclusion. 99.9% probability that Jae-sung was James's father. I don't understand, she whispered. How is this possible? Because 8 months ago, you and I spent one night together, Jae-sung said gently. And then, you were in an accident that took your memories of everything except Morris. We were together? She asked, trying to process this information. You used to work for me, Bella. You were my personal assistant for 2 years. And yes, we were together. Once. So that's why you've been taking care of us, she said slowly. Because James is your son. Partly, he admitted, but mostly because I've been in love with you since your first day of work, and losing you nearly destroyed me. Over the following days, Bella found herself studying Jae-sung's interactions with James, looking for signs of the connection he claimed existed between them. What she saw was a man who was clearly head over heels, in love with his son, but also someone who was holding himself back, as if he was afraid of claiming too much too soon. You can hold him more, you know, she said one afternoon as Jae-sung hesitated before picking up the baby. He's your son. I don't want to overstep, Jae-sung said carefully. You don't remember our relationship. I don't want you to feel pressured. Jae-sung, she interrupted. Whatever happened between us in the past, James deserves to have his father in his life. You don't have to ask permission to bond with your own child. Something shifted in his expression, relief mixing with gratitude. Are you sure? I'm sure, she said, and watched as he carefully lifted James, the baby immediately settling against his chest, as if he belonged there. But even as she encouraged Jae-sung's relationship with their son, Bella continued to struggle with her urge to leave. The feeling was so persistent and powerful that she began to wonder if there was something wrong with her mentally. It was James himself who provided the answer. The first time she actually tried to leave with him, packing a bag and making it as far as the front door, James began crying with a desperation that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him. Nothing she did could comfort him. Not feeding, not changing, not rocking. He cried as if his heart was breaking. I don't know what's wrong with him, she told Jae-sung frantically when he came running at the sound of his son's distress. May I? Jae-sung asked, reaching for the baby. The moment James was in his father's arms, the crying stopped. The baby looked up at Jae-sung with wide, serious eyes, then reached out one tiny hand toward Bella. It's like he's trying to keep us together, Bella said in wonder. Maybe he knows something we don't, Jae-sung replied softly. This pattern continued every time Bella tried to leave. James would become inconsolable until both his parents were together again, as if the baby understood on some instinctive level that his family belonged together. "I think he's trying to tell us something," Bella said, one evening after another failed departure attempt. "I think he knows this is home," Jae-sung said carefully. "I think he knows we belong together, even if you can't remember why." 2 months after James's birth, Bella was preparing Jae-sung's lunch when she realized he left for work without it. "He'll be hungry," she said to herself, automatically bundling James into his carrier. "He always forgets to eat when he's stressed." The drive to Kang Industries felt familiar in a way she couldn't explain. Walking through the lobby with James in her arms, being greeted by security guards who seemed to know her, taking the elevator to the executive floor, it all felt like coming home. "Bella," the secretary jumped up with genuine delight. "And this must be James. He's absolutely perfect." "Mrs. Bella started, then paused, surprised. "Mrs. Chen, you remember me?" the woman asked hopefully. Your name just came to me," Bella said, feeling more confused than ever. "Mr. Kong is on a conference call, but I'm sure he won't mind the interruption. Not for you." Without really thinking about it, Bella found herself walking toward Jae-sung's office, her feet carrying her down a path that felt automatic and natural. She knocked softly and heard him call out in Korean, probably telling whoever it was to wait. But instead of waiting, she found herself opening the door and walking in, just as naturally as breathing. Jae-sung was facing away from the door, speaking rapidly into his headset in Korean. His posture was tense with stress, and without thinking, Bella moved to his desk and set down his lunch in exactly the right spot, not too close to his computer, but within easy reach. Then, as automatically as she entered his office, she moved behind his chair and began massaging the tension from his shoulders. The moment her hands touched him, everything stopped. Jae-sung went completely still, his conversation faltering mid-sentence. The familiar feel of her hands, the automatic way she knew exactly where he was tense, the muscle memory of a routine they shared for months. It all came crashing back to him in a rush of emotion so powerful he could barely breathe. Slowly, he reached up and covered her hands with his own, marveling at how perfectly they fit together. How right this felt after months of careful distance. "Gentlemen," he said into his headset, his voice rough with emotion, "I need to call you back." He ended the call and slowly turned his chair around to face her. Bella was staring down at him with wide, wondering eyes, fragments of memory beginning to surface like pieces of a puzzle, finally falling into place. "I remember this office," she whispered. "What else do you remember?" he asked gently, afraid to hope but unable to stop himself. "I remember..." She paused, more images flooding back. "I remember working here, late nights, bringing you coffee, organizing your schedule." Her voice grew stronger as more pieces clicked into place. "I remember feeling safe here, important." "You were important," he confirmed. "You were everything." "I remember Morris calling, getting angry when I worked late. I remember you defending me, standing up to him." Tears began to flow as the memories became clearer. "I remember thinking that no one ever protected me like that before." "And do you remember the celebration dinner?" he asked softly. "The night everything changed?" "I remember drinking too much because Morris was cruel to me earlier," she said, the full memory returning now. "I remember feeling broken, worthless, and you told me I was beautiful. You told me I deserved better." "You did deserve better," Jae-sung said, standing slowly and moving closer to her. "You deserved everything." "I remember kissing you," she whispered, reaching up to touch his face. "I remember feeling more alive in that moment than I did in years. I remember thinking that this was what love was supposed to feel like. And then I got scared," she admitted, tears flowing freely now. "I was so conditioned to believe that Morris was all I deserved, that love was supposed to be hard and painful. What I felt with you was so different, so easy and natural that it terrified me." "So you left?" "So I ran," she corrected, "and I said terrible things to you. I told you that you took advantage of me, that what happened was a mistake." You were protecting yourself, Jae-sung said, his hands coming up to frame her face. You were doing what you thought you had to do. But I hurt you, she said, her voice breaking. I can see it in your eyes. I hurt you so badly, and then I disappeared. And then you came back to me, he said softly. You and our son came back to me. I love you, she said suddenly, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. I think I have all along, even when I couldn't remember why. I think that's why I couldn't leave. My heart knew what my mind forgot. I love you too, he replied, leaning down to kiss her forehead gently. I never stopped loving you. They stood there in his office, holding each other and their son, finally complete after months of separation and confusion. The memories were fully restored now,